Wow, really? That must be tough. Yeah, I got it. I'll be right there.
It might be a mishearing due to the pain, but I think I just heard Kenny say on the phone to Hannah that he's coming right away.
My sister Hannah was going to her favorite band's concert, but the train stopped due to an accident, and she can't get there. I'll go give her a ride.
After saying that, Kenny opened the door of the back seat where I was sitting.
You can get to the hospital on your own.
He quickly got me and my luggage out of the car, curled up in pain.
You should be able to get an ambulance in your condition. Listen, call 911 right away and ask for help. I won't forgive you if anything happens to our heir.
With that, he drove off.
Please, help me.
The number you have dialed is currently not in use. Please check the number and dial again. The number you have dialed is currently. I pretended it was a machine voice and repeated it several times, then hung up the smartphone and blocked Kenny's number. My name is Molly Smith. I'm 27 years old. I'm a grade school teacher, but currently on maternity leave. I'm nearly 10 months pregnant and my due date is coming up soon. I'm anxious about my first childbirth, but I'm counting down the days until I can meet my baby. My husband, Kenny, is 3 years older than me, 30 years old. We met in a university club and became friends, and started dating after he graduated. 2 years ago, we got married, and now we're expecting our first child. When we told both sets of parents, they were overjoyed and told us to take good care of ourselves. However, there was one person who responded disinterestedly.
More importantly, I told my boss I wanted next week off for a concert, but he said no, so I quit in a huff. Let them struggle with the staff shortage. Serves him right.
That was Kenny's sister. When we announced the pregnancy, she dismissed my news as that kind of thing and kept muttering complaints about her part-time job. My mother-in-law quickly scolded Kenny's sister, Hannah.
It doesn't concern me, after all. Besides, it's not even certain the baby will be born safely yet.
She said something outrageous. I was furious, but I've known this is how she is, so I didn't bother getting angry all over again. Hannah is Kenny's older sister by 7 years, a bit older. She was spoiled rotten by her grandparents, her father's parents, until she was old enough to remember, and she's never lost her princess attitude. That was the case even when we got married. Normally, out of consideration for the bride, guests wear outfits that allow her to shine. However, Hannah insisted on wearing a flashy dress and ultimately attended in it. It was a white mini dress with lots of feather decorations, like something an idol would wear. Apparently, she mistook our wedding for her own solo show.
Look, I really do look better in this dress. Sorry, it might be hard to tell who the bride is.
When my relatives and friends looked at Hannah in surprise, she mistook their stares for admiration and came over just to say that. I was more stunned than angry and couldn't reply. It's no wonder she wore such an outfit, but Kenny and his parents who didn't stop her are also to blame. My parents and I felt incredibly embarrassed. Before we got married, I thought Kenny was kind and a really good person, but at that moment, I first thought something was off. However, I still believed in Kenny then and had feelings for him, so I turned a blind eye. It's just Hannah who's odd. The in-laws are just dumbfounded by such a sister and couldn't say anything, and so is Kenny. I tried to convince myself of that. A little after starting our new life, there was a field trip for the second graders I teach. The destination was a planetarium in the city. Taking smart children out of school is nerve-wracking. You have to make sure no one gets lost or involved in an accident until you get back to school. They say the trip isn't over until you get home, and that's exactly right. I had to stay alert the whole time. As soon as we arrived at the planetarium, my phone, which was on vibrate in my bag, started shaking. It was a call from an unknown number. I usually don't answer calls from unknown numbers. So I ignored it, but it kept ringing persistently, and I thought it might disturb the planetarium show, so I turned off the phone. After the show, it was time for the kids to go see the inner exhibits. Science museum staff would guide them, so it was a brief moment of relief for the chaperoning teachers. I sat down on a sofa in the break area with other teachers, drank a cup of coffee I bought from a vending machine, and took a break. When I turned my phone back on, there was an unbelievable number of missed calls. The unknown number had switched to Kenny's halfway through. Could something have happened to one of his parents? I excused myself from my colleagues and hurried off to make the call.
You're late. What were you doing?
He snapped at me immediately. I had told him I was on a school field trip today. I explained that I had turned off my phone so as not to disturb the show.
You could have just set it to vibrate. Why'd you turn it off? Anyway, you're at Civic Forest Park, right?
The science museum with the planetarium is located in a city-owned forest park. It's a bit far from the city center, so you can only get there by bus or car.
My sister's second favorite idol is having a pop-up concert at the outdoor theater, and they're selling limited edition photos with today's date. Can you pick one up for me?
For a moment, I thought he was joking. I'm here for work today. I can't leave my post for such an errand. The forest park is vast, and it takes about 20 minutes to walk back and forth between the science museum and the outdoor theater. Plus, it's raining today. Go out in this weather to buy photos for Hannah. I firmly declined and reiterated to Kenny that I was at work.
I'm disappointed, Molly. I didn't think you were such a cold person. That's not you, right? Molly's supposed to be kind-hearted. Please, just go do it.
Kenny tried to guilt trip and flatter me into going, but I was at work and couldn't accept, no matter what he said.
Fine, whatever. I'm done.
Kenny shouted this and hung up. I felt a chill in my heart. I couldn't believe Kenny would ask for something so unreasonable. It was incredibly unpleasant and sad. Still, I managed to control my emotions and finish the school field trip. When I got home, Kenny wasn't there, but there was a message on my smartphone saying he was waiting at his parents' house. Feeling heavy-hearted, I walked the 15 minutes to my in-laws' house. There were Kenny's parents, Kenny and Hannah.
Apologize to Hannah.
That was the first thing said. Hannah had learned about the pop-up concert during her part-time job, rushed out of work to the outdoor theater, but by the time she arrived, the limited edition photos had sold out.
Poor thing, she's been crying a lot.
Hannah was still sniffling, looking down. Kenny was rubbing her back, making a pitiful face. Checking on how my in-laws are doing. Both of them looked sorry but did nothing more. They probably haven't even considered what to do about their unreasonable daughter and son. Hannah sniffled for a while, but eventually wiped her face with a crumpled idol merchandise towel and smiled brightly.
It's okay now. Instead, buy this for me.
She thrust her smartphone at me. It was a screen from a flea market app.
See, she'll forgive you for today if you buy that for her. Lucky, huh?
Kenny pointed excitedly to a photo that seemed to be the limited edition print from today. $300. It was priced at $300, a stark contrast to the prints that were originally selling for $5.
It's a steal, right? All it takes is just that little to make up with your sister.
Just that. $300 is just that. For a single piece of paper. Hannah was looking at me with an expectant smile. With her right hand, she was offering the smartphone, and with her left, she pressed it against her lips, fully playing up her cute me act. Kenny was adoringly gazing at Hannah's profile. The in-laws, just like before, gave me apologetic looks but seemed to have no intention of doing more. I had no intention of playing along with this farce. However, I realized that if I didn't make my stance clear now, I would continue to be manipulated in the future. And so, I decided to give in to Hannah's demand this time. All right, I'll buy it. Hannah's face lit up, and she clapped her hands like a child. But I want you to know this isn't an apology. This is the first and last time. I won't lift a finger for Hannah ever again. This is my declaration. In front of a surprised Kenny and Hannah, and the in-laws exchanging troubled looks, I won the $300 print. Then I left the in-laws' house without a word and went home alone. For a while, Kenny stayed at his parents' house and didn't come back, but eventually, he returned as if nothing had happened. I silently accepted it. I had no intention of asking what Hannah did with the print, nor did I plan to have any more interactions with her. If anything more was said or done, I was ready to end our marriage. Perhaps Kenny sensed my resolve because he stopped mentioning Hannah altogether. And so, we returned to being a normal couple and settled into a peaceful life. During that time, I noticed something was off. Thinking it might be the case, I bought a test kit from the pharmacy and it came back positive. I've got pregnant. To share the news, I visited my in-laws for the first time in months, and while they were delighted, Hannah treated it as just another thing. After that, I never met Hannah again, and the baby in my belly grew healthily. It's a boy. I wonder what kind of cute child he will be. And finally, the time for childbirth arrived. My water broke, and I quickly prepared to go to the hospital. The labor pains started soon after.
Are you okay? I'll take you to the hospital right now.
Kenny gently helped me into the car and drove to the hospital. Despite my anxiety about childbirth, I knew I would be okay because Kenny was with me. I calmed myself and gently stroked my belly. It's okay, we'll meet soon, I whispered. Suddenly, a familiar sound echoed through the car. It was Kenny's smartphone. This ringtone must be from his sister Hannah.
Hello, yes.
Kenny pulled the car over to the side and answered a call. Why is he answering the phone now? Wasn't he supposed to rush me to the hospital? While enduring another wave of pain, I thought this.
What, really? That stuff? Yeah, I got it. I'll be right there.
Is it just my mishearing due to the pain? Or did Kenny just say he'll come right over in response to Hannah's call?
Hannah said she can't make it to her fave's live concert because the train stopped due to an accident. I'm going to give her a ride to the venue.
After saying that, Kenny opened the rear car door where I was sitting.
You can get yourself to the hospital, right?
He quickly got me and my luggage out of the car, curling up in pain.
You should be able to get an ambulance in your condition. Listen, call 911 right away and ask for help. I won't forgive you if anything happens to our heir.
With that, he drove off. I was left on the roadside with my luggage. Is this really happening? To treat his wife, who is about to give birth, like this? I no longer even feel angry. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Fortunately, there were no passers-by around. I laughed so loudly that I thought it was good timing. My mind was surprisingly calm, but my body couldn't stop laughing. Hello, I need an ambulance, please. Yes, the location is... Looking at a nearby building, I provided my approximate location. I got into the ambulance that arrived and headed to the hospital alone. The hospital quickly admitted me and started preparing for childbirth. I called my parents and calmly explained what happened today. They were speechless and said they would come right away. When I was left on the street, I felt I could handle whatever came next alone, but knowing people were coming to support me was reassuring. Waves of pain came and went. The nurses and midwives checked on me, telling me things were progressing well. About an hour after arriving at the hospital, my phone rang. It was during a lull in the contractions, so I picked it up and saw the last person I wanted to see on the display. It was Kenny. I ignored the phone for a while, but after several missed calls and hang-ups, I decided to answer. Not because I cared about Kenny, but because it was too annoying. When I pressed the call button, Kenny's voice burst out.
Hello, Molly. Oh, thank goodness you answered.
Kenny's voice sounded genuinely relieved. Maybe he was finally worried about his pregnant wife and unborn child he'd left behind. But that thought was quickly proven wrong.
Please, help me.
I thought I was being told something nonsensical. What kind of help could he possibly need at a time like this, with his wife about to give birth?
Actually, there was a little accident at a rest area.
The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and dial again. The number you have dialed is currently... I pretended it was a recorded message and repeated it a few times before I hung up and blocked Kenny's number. I gave birth safely to a boy. It was surprisingly an easy delivery. Perhaps the shock of the events had numbed my senses to the pain. It was over before I knew it, and the hospital staff were amazed at how smooth it went for a first-time birth. After all, an easier experience is always better. As I watched my sleeping son, I felt truly happy. He was born so quickly that my parents, who rushed from far away, missed the birth. They seemed apologetic, but they were more relieved that my son and I were safe, and they smiled warmly. Their smiles made me happy, too. I didn't inform my in-laws. If Kenny wants to tell them, he can do it himself. Even if they did come, I have no intention of letting them see my son. This child is mine alone. He has no connection to Kenny's family. I had already told the hospital not to let anyone from Kenny's family visit. Only my parents were welcome. Perhaps because I had asked to be notified and turned away anyone else. I never saw anyone from Kenny's family during my hospital stay. After 5 days in the hospital, I went straight home with my parents. Once home, I immediately contacted a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. Leaving a pregnant woman in labor by the roadside is surely grounds for divorce. The lawyer was appalled and mentioned it could constitute neglect of a guardian or even malicious abandonment causing harm. Abandoning a pregnant woman in labor, who can't defend herself, on the roadside is nothing short of monstrous, he said, and I agreed. Incidentally, Kenny had called for help that day, but I had already shut down any communication from his family, so I remained unaware of what happened. I asked the lawyer to find out what had happened, just out of curiosity. The story I heard from the lawyer was beyond saving. After abandoning me to pick up his sister Hannah, Kenny stopped at a rest area on the highway. It was about a 90-minute drive to the concert venue, including time for trains and buses. Hannah, who had left home with plenty of time to buy merchandise and take photos, decided to eat something on the way. Of course, at Kenny's expense. After eating a specialty meal at the rest area, they were about to head to the venue when Hannah flung open the car door and hit the car next to them. This is what's called a door ding. She hit it hard enough to cause significant damage to the door of the car next to them. Normally, you'd apologize to the car owner, call the police or insurance, or take some action, but incredibly, they decided to flee.
No one's looking right now, we're good. Besides, if we're late, we'll miss the concert.
As Kenny was about to drive away after hearing this, the owner of the car came back. And to make matters worse, there were 4 rather intimidating-looking guys. Surrounded and unable to drive away, Kenny was dragged out of the car and scolded for trying to flee. Meanwhile, Hannah was pleading with these tough guys, saying she needed to leave or she'd be late for the concert. It's one thing to be indulged with ridiculous demands within the family, but it's unrealistic to expect strangers, let alone the victims of your actions, to comply. Hannah desperately tried to charm and beg, but honestly, only her family would think she's cute. Of course, the victims weren't going to accept her pleas. Fearing she wouldn't make it, not just to the concert, but even to the merchandise sale before it, Hannah started screaming and crying loudly. The tough guys were lambasting them for trying to escape. Hannah in her flashy concert attire was wailing. Service area employees and customers gathered around, causing a huge scene. Distressed, Kenny called me for help, which is bewildering. What was he thinking? Did he forget that I was on my way to the hospital in labor? Or did he expect that I'd pause my childbirth to come and rescue him? Maybe he wanted me to drive Hannah to her concert. That might have been his idea of help. Regardless of the reason, going there to help was out of the question. Even if I were in any normal condition, I'd decline rushing to such a scene. They need to handle their own problems. It turned out Kenny hadn't insured his car. I had given him money from our budget because he said it was necessary, but it appears he'd been diverting those funds. That money went to Hannah's allowance. At 37, Hannah still works part-time because she's following an idol group. She could find a decent job if she wanted, but she refuses because she wouldn't be able to take time off for concerts. And it seems she often quits these jobs on a whim for wanting a day off, or gets fired for taking too many. She frivolously spends a bit of money she earns and the allowance she gets from her parents, and of course, she mooches off Kenny too. Kenny had been giving her the car insurance money as allowance and pretended nothing was amiss. The accident involved a luxury foreign car. The repair costs would be entirely out of pocket. I refused his absurd suggestion that we should work together to pay it off. The divorce discussions were contentious. Kenny was furious with the lawyer, unable to understand why he should be divorced.
I was just trying to get my sister to a concert on time. Who could have predicted such an accident would happen?
Yeah, Kenny did nothing wrong. It's those guys who are to blame, making such a big deal over a little scratch.
They ranted bitterly about the victims, and apparently, after that, they started bad-mouthing me. It seems that Kenny thought my wanting a divorce was because of that accident.
Molly is being childish for wanting a divorce over a minor car accident. Tell her to stop fooling around and come back home right away.
That's right, just over that.
After criticizing the victims, they started a parade of insults about me. Kenny and Hannah both were running me down, and the in-laws just sat there silently with troubled faces. I could imagine it as if it were happening right in front of me. When the lawyer told Kenny that the main reason was not the accident, but abandoning a pregnant woman halfway through, Kenny seemed genuinely shocked.
What? Over that? But Molly got to the hospital by ambulance and gave birth safely, right? There wasn't any problem, was there?
It's really being blown out of proportion.
Yeah, and Hannah was about to miss her concert because the train stopped, right? Wasn't it natural for me to drive her?
Kenny smugly stated this, and Hannah nodded vigorously in agreement next to him. Of course, the in-laws just sat there with troubled expressions. The lawyer mentioned he was getting a headache trying to figure out how to explain the situation. He carefully prefaced that the divorce had nothing to do with the accident and that issues should be resolved on their side. Then, he explained how serious Kenny's actions were. Despite repeated explanations, Kenny kept insisting that everything turned out fine since I managed to get to the hospital on my own and nothing happened. However, after the lawyer persistently explained that both the baby and I could have been at risk, and Kenny could have faced legal charges if things had gone wrong, he finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. He turned pale, began to tremble, and asked if he and Hannah could get arrested. Even then, he seemed more worried about himself and Hannah than about me and the baby, the lawyer reported with a tone of pity. It was a struggle, but the divorce was finalized successfully, and I was free from Kenny and his family. I felt relieved, but Kenny was clingy, continuing to call persistently and send messages on social media asking for reconciliation. It was so annoying that I had to block him again, and when I did, he started sending letters to my parents' house. According to Kenny's letter, he didn't expect me to be so upset over such a thing.
Since the childbirth went well, isn't it harsh to divorce over just one mistake? You were supposed to be more forgiving. Give me another chance. Don't you want a daughter next time? It's sad for our son to be an only child. Besides, our son is the heir to the Smith family. Give him back. If you do, I'll acknowledge you once again as a daughter-in-law of the Smith family. It's not a bad deal, is it?
It started off humbly but gradually took a more condescending tone, obviously influenced by Hannah, as indicated at the end of the letter.
So, my sister says she's willing to forgive you now. Think it over.
I could predict it from the moment I started reading the letter, but I almost laughed reading it, and by the end, I burst out laughing. Once I had the lawyer reiterate a no-contact order and mention that any further contact would result in an increase in damages, communication stopped abruptly. I can only wryly smile at how quickly he backed off once money was involved. It seems money matters more to them than the important heir. From the in-laws, there has been nothing. From the beginning to the end, they've been like extras in a drama, just background characters. They haven't expressed any desire to see their grandchild, so there's no need for me to say anything either. Since I can't trust the entire family, I demanded a lump sum payment for alimony and child support. I couldn't bear the thought of enduring a relationship with them over the years, and I anticipated they might stop making payments eventually. The total, including my payments, accident repair costs, and other fees, was substantial. Kenny took out a loan against his parents' house in his name to pay it all at once. I hope it doesn't come to them losing their house, but that's no longer my concern. Even the combined alimony and child support won't be enough to raise a child to adulthood. Once I'm feeling better and my son is more settled, I plan to return to work as a teacher. Fortunately, my parents have offered to help, and I'm sure we'll manage somehow. I want my son to think for himself and be able to live independently. Not like his father, who was only connected by blood, nor like Hannah. And certainly not like the in-laws, who were always there, yet it was hard to tell if they truly were. Though my marriage ended disappointingly, I am grateful that it gave me my son. From now on, it will just be the two of us, living happily. And if there's a new person in the future who loves my son and me, I won't hesitate to embrace that new happiness.